Welcome, guys, to the MMOs.com podcast, episode 114. Altai, joined this week by the one, the only...
Omer.
There it is. All right, guys, we have good production for you this week, but as always, let us start with the last week's weekly raid, which was, how important is co-op for you? And, of course, Fortnite is what inspired this. And we got a few comments. A couple of you guys actually said you were not interested in co-op, and you guys you said I like PvP more. Easy Machiavelli left a very good response actually this week. He said he liked leveling in WoW and the co-op experience, like the unplanned co-op experience, and he mentioned like hatred of the other faction. So like if you enter a zone that had PvP with the other faction, you would like naturally work together to kill people from the other faction that you see. Right, like so it wasn't like you queue together for like a co-op dungeon because that's like kind of structured. He kind of liked the more unstructured. Well, there's a horde guy. You know, we're two alliance. So let's just go kill him without saying a word. You guys just know to team up. You know, so that was an interesting dynamic.
I think that worked really well in WoW too, because I mean, like, even if like you gank some random horde player for your alliance, like even if that one guy did nothing to you, you know, you always have a memory of when you got camped by some asshole horde player, you know, and then you'll be like, I gotta take it out on this guy, you know, and you take that revenge out on somebody else, you know. It seems like almost like a petty dynamic, but I think that keeps players invested in the game, and it kind of makes these emergent experiences happen, you know. And
yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah, it's kind of a buzzword, but I think it does apply.
Yeah, and I remember so many times in WoW being chased by someone from the opposite faction who was higher level than me, right? And I was being chased. I thought I was dead for sure, but I would turn around and the other guy was dead. And then so someone from my faction who's higher level would just help me, like save me, you know? So it kind of was, without saying a word, there was some co-op play going on. So that's cool. That's always fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, co-op. Good stuff. Now, with that out of the way, let us move on to this week's weekly raid. And this week, once again, we're inspired by Albion Online. It had a good launch, very big launch, still very popular, still packed game, but it's having a few controversies now. I think last week, Omar, you mentioned something about they made ganking harder, right? Because once you get off the mount, you can't attack. Now that caused a few issues, and some people said the game is over because of that. Like the whole like sandbox experience is dead. You know, it's Care Bear Land again. But at least that was a gameplay change, right? It's all gameplay, and you can have different opinions on it, but at the end of the day, it's part of the game, this way or that way. This week's controversy with Albion is a little more complicated. And it's actually very difficult to explain. I don't know. Do you want to explain it or should I? I
got the gist of it. Maybe if you read it more recently, you can.
Okay. So here's what happened, boys. Here's what happened. There's a guild in Albion Online called the Iron Bank. And they're apparently a pretty high-end guild, pretty, wealthy. And the way apparently plots work in that game is you bid on, persistent plots in the one realm. There's only one server. So if you own that land, you're the only one who owns that specific plot. So they're trying to bid. They were bidding for a piece of land, and they were outbid. But then they were outbid magnificently, like by a huge margin. And they thought something was fishy. So they Googled around the guy's name who was outbidding them, and they figured out that it was. Well, they assumed that it was a Chinese gangster syndicate that does gold farming, gold selling, power leveling, and just straight up credit card fraud. So what they would do is they buy stolen credit card numbers. They buy in-game gold with those stolen credit cards from the official Albion, store. So it's nothing illegal here so far. Well, it's illegal, but nothing outside the game so far. And then with all that gold, they buy silver from players, right? There's an in-game exchange for gold to silver. And with that silver, they bid up the price for in-game real estate. So basically, they have unlimited resources because they can just keep using stolen credit cards. And it doesn't matter if they get refunded because they got their silver in-game. So the Iron Bank, I guess GM, left a huge post on the official forums, which got removed, but somebody on Reddit took a screenshot, so you guys can read this whole thing. It's all linked in the weekly raid, but it's a pretty long post. But basically, he's saying, "Listen, we contacted Albion to try to get this stopped, and Albion offered an interesting reply. They said we can give you 50% of the gold back, or the silver, and the other 50% back later. And the reason they wanted a refund is because they wanted a refund between what they had to end up overbidding to win, to keep their real estate, and what the third highest bid was. So the only other bid, the highest bid besides the gold seller, right? The syndicate. Long story short, even they said we're leaving the server, even if this particular problem gets resolved, because this issue of outside money, right? Whether it's, gold sellers, botters, criminals, they're going to keep pouring money into this game. And legit people who just want to role play as the Iron Bank in this medieval world, they're never going to have a fair chance. It's going to be pay to win from now till doomsday. And that's pretty much why they said they left the game.
And I think it's worth mentioning that Albion Online is more affected by RMT than your traditional MMORPG. Because whether you're playing Final Fantasy XIV, World of Warcraft, Maple Story, any game, it's really, you know, you don't need money or in-game gil or gold that much. Almost everything is driven by like your ability to complete raids, like high-end difficult raids. And that's not the case for Albion. It's money gives you control over territory and gives you access to so much stuff in-game. So it's a different kind of progression, and I think sandbox games are more vulnerable to this kind of like credit card fraud, this kind of, you know, RMT stuff ruining the game, much more so than other games.
Okay, and then with that story out of the way, the reason I brought it up mainly is in a sandbox game that the Albion is trying to build, right? You kind of need to keep control over the real world economy pouring into your game economy, right? Because otherwise, because you don't want it to be complete pay to win, where nothing you do in the game really matters. Because if I work at McDonald's, right, and I use the money I make at McDonald's to just buy gold in Albion from gold sellers, right? If that gives me a huge advantage over someone who's playing 24 hours a day, right, then the whole sandbox experience kind of melts away. It just becomes pointless, right? So the question is, can virtual worlds stay separate from the real one? So can studios keep RMT, gold selling, you know, this kind of stuff away from their games? And they've tried for years. I remember Ultima Online, EverQuest, even they had gold RMT problems. And imagine how much bigger the problem is now with the growth of the internet. Like back then, the average gold seller was just an enthusiastic amateur in his house who just like had bots running, like literal. He might have like 8 accounts in his basement, right? Today, they're professional criminal syndicates, you know, just using these games as a way to make, you know, huge money and, you know, launder stolen credit card funds. So it is a monumental challenge to deal with this stuff.
And to address your question, can worlds stay separate from the real one? I think MMORPGs, virtual world in MMORPGs is a resounding no. You can have online experiences with MMO elements where it is feasible to keep them separate, like stuff where, like, you know, maybe League of Legends or PUBG, or again, these aren't traditional MMOs at all, but like MMORPGs definitely no. But when the game can have real money features that don't really affect the game too much, it's much more plausible. And I think there's still this romantic idea that like when you're playing an MMORPG, whether you're a loser in real life, whether you're, you know, some nerd in real life, in this world, like Ultima Online, EverQuest, or Final Fantasy XIV, you can be this hero. You know, you can be somebody else. You can be someone totally separate, and your merits in that world are what distinguish you from other players. And I think that sounds really nice on paper, but as always, real money is going to ruin it, because, you know, even if you're the nerd but you're really good at the game, the lawyer or the professional who works can afford to just buy in-game currency, buy power levels, buy accounts, and all of a sudden, it is no longer the meritocracy it was intended to be. The real world is unfortunately going to creep its way into the world. Though I do think that idea of everyone being on equal footing in a virtual world, it sounds so good, and it really is like the dream, you know? Like, I would love that. I would love for that to happen. But real money, economics, incentives are going to unfortunately make that dream impossible. Yeah,
and to play on that from like the old days, you know, when MMORPGs first came out, the internet was still kind of new. The people involved in it, you really could not easily send money on internet. You know, before, I'm talking like before PayPal and stuff. You know, it was really its own isolated island. Like EverQuest, Ultima Online was basically an island, and you know, you were on the island. You can do whatever you want on the island, and then when you log out, you go back to you know, the mainland, the continent. And today, because of how big the internet is nothing's an island anymore. You know, it's all so connected with the real world that it's kind of difficult to separate the two, because you'll always have, like Omar, you said, people RMTing, botting, hacking, buying accounts, selling accounts, and it really seems like studios kind of gave up on this, because so many studios now allow just direct purchase of game time or currency directly from the company. So whether it's, you know, World of Warcraft, EVE Online, in Neverwinter, there's always like a premium currency, or even the standard currency can be bought. Well, I guess in WoW and EVE, the premium currency is just game time, right? But in games like Neverwinter, there's a premium currency and a standard currency, and there's always an exchange between them, and the company sells you at least one of those currencies directly.
Black Desert Online is a more recent example. Blade and Soul as well with NC coins, the gold ratio marketplace in the game. It's really been embraced to the point where now it's they gave up almost, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, Black Desert is an interesting example because I think there's two ways studios are dealing with this. One, embrace it and just sell everything yourself, right, for cash. Sell the gold yourself. Or what Black Desert does is, in order to fight the RMT as much as they can, they restrict the whole virtual economy world aspects of the game. So there's no trading in Black Desert. The auction house is not an auction house. The company sets the prices in the store, right? So it's and then obviously that feels less like an MMORPG now when it does that kind of stuff. So there's two ways to fight this, and neither is working because Black Desert, by the way, has plenty of power leveling and RMT stuff going on too. So it's kind of an interesting story, and it gets even wilder with the Steve Bannon thing. Do you want to cover that?
Yeah, it's actually really odd because when I first read about the Albion thing, somebody mentioned on Reddit that it's people who deal with RMTs are the scum of the universe. For example, even the President Trump's strategist, Steve Bannon.
Chief strategist.
Again, very prominent figure in the White House. He's got a lot of pull and power in America right now. He was involved with IGE to the point where he was actually playing a managerial role and an actual role running IGE, which was actually the biggest gold-selling farming RMT website in the world. We're talking tens of millions of dollars slushing around with RMT, and he was... the headline, I think, on the Washington Post, which broke the story, was that Stevene Bannon once guided a global firm that made millions helping gamers cheat.
Yeah,
which is pretty remarkable.
It's for a whole 6 months now, guys. I've been trying to connect Trump with MMOs just so I could talk about Trump because all the news media, they know if you mention Trump, your ratings go up, right? So I couldn't sneak him in, but now I can sneak him in. The brains behind the White House, behind Trump, right, which is Steve Bannon, the chief strategist. He's the guy who runs Breitbart and all that. He was literally one of the big dogs at the biggest gold farming, gold selling company in the world. That is insane to think about. The world, America is being run right now by a gold seller, guys. Just think of it that way.
And not just a gold seller, the biggest gold seller ever. All right. I mean, I feel like that's gonna make a lot of gamers kind of hate Trump to a degree because I think gold selling and RMT is one of the most universally disliked aspects of MMORPGs or gaming in general. Because we do have, as gamers, we have this sense of fairness, and I do think again it does go back to that romantic idea of a meritocracy in online games, where it doesn't matter if you're a lawyer, a doctor in real life, or if you're just a broke kid in the in the projects. When you're on an MMORPG, you're all on equal footing. But seeing people buy their way into power, unearned power, it does frustrate people. And honestly, it almost it almost feels like it shouldn't, because you do derive your own fun. But if you work so hard in an online game to get where you are, and some other asshole which is so undeserving, some punk with no skills, he just bought an account, and he gets to where you did without putting in the effort, the work, the grind. It has this nagging feeling of injustice, and it does get people upset, and it would get me upset as well, for sure, if somebody else achieved what I did without actually earning it.
I mean, there's a sense of unfairness, but I think the more interesting story here is how much gamers influenced the Trump presidency, the rise of Trump. When I first heard about the whole the memes, there was on 4chan, they were we got Trump elected, right? We memed, Trump to the White House, and I didn't really believe it, right? I was that might be a very, very small minority of Trump's followers, right? The 4chan memers. But here's a direct quote by Trump. I'll give you a direct quote after the sentence. As Bannon was running IGE, right, selling gold, here's a quote from the article. Bannon became fascinated with the collective power of the gamers who gathered on these sites, according to journalist Joshua Green, who wrote a book, Devil's Bargain, about Bannon's rise in the Trump administration. Selling virtual currency was highly unpopular among many gamers, and they railed against IGE in these chat rooms, putting pressure on the company that operated the games not to partner with IGE. And here's a direct quote from Bannon himself. Quote, "These guys, these rootless white males had monster power," Bannon told Green. So Bannon, he learned, first, as a gold seller, he learned how much the power gamers had. Guys, we rootless male gamers have a lot of power, apparently. So there you go.
There you go. We got the power.
So the gamers got Trump elected, boys. That's it.
Now, if we could have the ideal, with the fact that money should not be allowed to buy unfairness. Like, do you think if that was possible, that would be would you support that? Like, or do you just think people should derive their own fun? Because I think we've had diverging opinions on this one before.
Look, in a perfect world, there would be games that are totally isolated, right? So you log in and there's no way to get in-game gold or currency or whatever, rather than playing the game. But that's not ideal. I think it's impossible.
I think it's impossible too. I mean, I would like that to happen in some form where you kind of stand on your own legs. But it's people were saying that if you have a buy to play or a subscription MMORPG, it's reduced. But I think that doesn't really avoid the issue at all, because people could always buy power levels or accounts
or just gold. Just buy the in-game currency from RM tiers.
Even if there's no gold, imagine there's no transactions. It doesn't matter. You can buy an account with all the power anyway, and that still kind of circumvents the whole meritocracy issue.
Yeah. And I think I left an interesting question at the end of the weekly raid. So my prediction, here's the thing. Are we doomed to settle for pay-to-win business models like those found in mobile strategy games like Clash of Clans? Or should studios try harder to come up with ways to wall off their virtual worlds from real-world influences? So I think game studios today are going down a dark path. Like even if it's something simple like what WoW does, right? You can buy the tokens, the game time tokens. I think the road's going to lead one way. Clash of Clans. That's it. Like where you just buy, you can spend $1,000, in one shot to build an army and attack somebody in the game.
To see that business model of Clash of Clans or Game of War apply itself to Final Fantasy XIV, World of Warcraft, Counter-Strike Go, more traditional non-pay-to-win gaming experiences, it would really, for me, signal the doom of gaming. I don't know if I would play newer games at that point, because when you start talking about Clash of Clans and Game of War, the pay-to-win element goes through the roof. Like you could spend $10,000 instantly to build up the best base possible. That would really ruin gaming for me. I would argue what we have today isn't that bad, but I think the reason a lot of people are upset about it is it kind of does foreshadow the path it's going to be. And that's why I think a lot of people get upset over it, because I think a lot of the issues about pay-to-win now aren't as big as people make it out to be. It's just that we see where it could end up.
Yeah, and there's a powerful incentive for companies to go down that road, because here, I'll give you an example. This whole Albion, back to Albion, the Iron Bank, they're leaving the game, Albion Online, over this bidding for this plot of land, right? And it's basically here, the Chinese gold farmers they bid against bid about $3,000 US, right? And that was an exorbitant amount. No other guild could match the gold farmers bid of $3,000 US. Okay, so that's why this whole guild left the server, or the game. But when you put that in perspective, a single person can spend 3,000 in a month in Clash of Clans.
Right? Oh, easily.
Yeah. So the dollar values. So once you go down, it's so little money to win in Albion. $3,000 for a lot of these pay to winners is nothing, because they drop that on shitty mobile games. So there's no fix for it. As soon as you allow players to buy in-game currency with dollars officially, you can expect people to pour tens of thousands of dollars in, guilds to pour tens of thousands of dollars in. So there's no chance of a player who doesn't do that from ever competing.
We were just talking about Imperial Palaces in Crowfall before. We were seeing this done in Shroud. They have it there, Crowfall. These ways to spend big money.
Yeah.
And I was thinking the only way you could maybe prevent this is have an MMORPG without traditional progression. Do you think you can have an MMORPG without any kind of levels or skill systems where you don't level up by getting skills or levels or XP or even gold in game, right? There has to be a way to level up without acquiring items or stats. But can a game like that maintain keep people playing? What would be the reason to keep playing?
I mean, I think it can. It's hard to do. I think Easy Machiavelli in chat just mentioned something about all you have to do is make gear and gold matter less while making skill matter more. And it's by skill, not skill points, but actual player skill. And a good example of this, unfortunately not an MMO, but is even Blade and Soul. If the combat is skill based, so even if two people are naked, if somebody knows how to play the game, they'll beat the other guy 100 out of 100 times almost, right? Yeah. And also Dark Souls comes to mind. There are people who beat the whole game with the starting sword, because it's all about knowing the monsters patterns, and not about just grinding levels. So there are ways to do it.
More games like that then, on the MMORPG front. We've seen it on Dark Souls, yes. And Blade and Soul is kind of split into two different ways, because you have the PvP arena, which is equalized and fair, and then you have the rest of the PvP and the rest of the game where gear does matter a lot. So maybe if you can split it, I think a lot of players would even if people end up paying to win the PvE experience,
Yeah, no more.
the other MMORPG part of the game can be kind of isolated, and it could be interesting.
Yeah, so imagine like a game like Albion or Eve, right? Eve Online, where there's like the green zones and the yellow zones, your gear stats matter. You grind off mobs or whatever, right? But then when you go to like the PvP continent, right, where you fight over resources and land control, over there, gear has no stats. It's just cosmetic, and it's just skill that wins the fight.
But it is unfortunate that we have to like try to devise means of creating a game where this kind of cheating is impossible, because I do think Albion Online as a game is pretty well designed, and like there's so much there that's phenomenal. It's a beautiful game. It's remarkably different, but it's a game that's so vulnerable to cheaters and RMTers and botters that would really ruin an otherwise remarkable experience. And they are ruining it. The botters and cheaters and RMTers already are ruining it, as we've clearly seen. They're outbidding real players, and the botting is going to destroy the resource-based economy. And otherwise, I thought it's such a good game, and we can't have good things like this anymore, because I hate to say it, we can't have good things because of these cheaters and people that are willing to exploit the game. And I don't know how much Sandbox Interactive, the guys that make Albion, can do to combat this, because again, they're not a giant studio, and even giant studios can't prevent RMT. But they've created a world which the incentives are so strong for botting, because the way resource gathering works is it's so bottable. So many aspects of the game are bottable, and how do you stop that? It's literally impossible to stop that.
Another good example of how studios cannot deal with this, even big studios. I'm sure you guys remember the Diablo 3 launch with the RMT store. Like, everyone thought that'd be a cool idea, right? Like, well, let the gamers cash in their investment of time. Like if you get a good weapon in the game, you can sell it in the store. That thing was a disaster. All the incentives were skewed towards the hackers, the botters, the flipper. It invited so much negative attention that it just didn't work. So even Blizzard could not deal with that system, and they shut it down massively. First, they got rid of RMT altogether, right, in the RMT store, and then they don't even allow trading anymore. You can't trade your goods in Diablo 3. You can trade with the people that in the same game as you when it dropped for like 2 hours, but after that, even that is canceled. So they basically did what Black Desert did and said, you know what, no trading. We can't handle it.
That's unfortunate. Again, companies like Black Desert are resorting to no trading policies, and MMORPGs without trading just don't feel like MMORPGs to me. We've seen other games do it. I don't know. It's not coming to me off the top of my head. But when you restrict trading, and you like what Diablo 3 did and what Black Desert did, these aren't like design decisions were made to make the game better. Like, it wasn't a part of the overall game design. It was done specifically to combat the botters and cheaters.
Yes.
But it's bad that game designers have to limit themselves to like, because they realize the problem that's unfixable. I think they've given up on trying to fix that problem. They're trying to design around it, and we kind of lose, the kinds of games we can have without that nonsense. Because we're going to lose the kinds of games like Albion, which we can have, until it's ruined because of the botters and cheaters.
Well, I think unfortunately, as it stands, all the financial incentives are skewed towards like the mobile pay-to-win system. And then I guess if we're done with this, we can move on to some of those financials, Amar, that came out this week about how all these companies are making money hand over fist with mobile. Yeah,
let's go look at I guess Blizzard first.
Okay.
They're making a lot of money. I'll drop you a link. A few things I want to share with you as well. There you go. Blizzard reported their financial earnings this week as well. And again, I follow a lot of these gaming companies. Blizzard is a company I unfortunately never invested in. I kind of wish I did. I've always thought they were too expensive, but they keep getting more expensive. And they reported a record revenue for a quarter, which they had no new game launches. And both Overwatch and Hearthstone are at all-time high monthly active users. And it's weird because I know a lot of my friends that stopped playing Overwatch, right? Because they're moving on to other things, they're playing PUBG. And again, I heard this thing, like Overwatch is dead. I'm like, wait a minute, how can you say Overwatch is dead? Like, the game literally reported the highest ever users it ever had. And people are saying it's dead because they stopped playing it. Again, it brings us back to that.
Oh yeah. We were talking earlier during the pregame about this. How when I stop playing a game, it doesn't mean the game is dead, guys. Just because you stop playing it doesn't mean the game is dead. So just keep in mind that a game could be growing even if you no longer want to play it.
Yeah. So basically, they made about 1.63 billion in revenue and net income of 243 million dollars, and that's in 3 months. Who would have guessed that Blizzard was so good at making money? I always make that joke when I put the news up for the game, because they always beat earning expectations. They beat the sales targets they put out for themselves. And, they always surprise everyone how much money they make. But I feel like as gamers, it shouldn't be a big surprise anymore that Blizzard, they make a lot of money. And Hearthstone was on that list as well for, Hearthstone's been out for a long time. Overwatch is a bit newer. Hearthstone, it's been out for a long time. And it's at the highest ever use it ever had, thanks to the most recent expansion, the Ungoro one. There's a new expansion launching, Knights of the Frozen Throne, I think, relatively soon. I think in a few weeks. And actually, go ahead.
I was going to say, actually, Activision Blizzard is actually the one of the few, I think, bright spots in PC gaming, because first of all, you kept calling it Blizzard. The company is actually called Activision Blizzard. Yeah. But the only part that matters to us, and I'm sure a lot of you viewing this, is the Blizzard part, right? And it's the Blizzard part that's doing the best for Activision Blizzard. Activision, if you guys look at these numbers I have up here, so Activision made $87 million in operating income this quarter.
Profit.
Profit. And then King, which is the mobile division they bought, made 164, where Blizzard made 225. So almost as much as the other two put together was Blizzard. And Blizzard, besides Hearthstone, it's all PC. It's not mobile.
Hearthstone's PC as well, to a degree.
Yeah. So I'd say at least half or a quarter or whatever of Hearthstone is PC. So Blizzard is basically PC, and it's doing really well. So I think Blizzard is actually the exception to the trend I find that where mobile is taking complete control over the market.
And actually, I think I want to bring us to a discussion that Owen Mahoney, the CEO of Nexon, he gave a pretty interesting presentation a couple weeks ago about he was talking to a group of investors and fund managers about Nexon and about gaming in general, some misconceptions about gaming. And he talked about the importance of product life cycles and what makes a good game and how they can make more money in gaming. And one interesting thing is he brought up Hearthstone as an example. He said that no one should be surprised that Hearthstone is breaking new records today. If you played Hearthstone the day it came out, you knew right from the get-go that it was a good game. I played Hearthstone the day it launched. I knew for a fact that the game was remarkable and it's going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's going to keep growing, right? Immediately, the moment I played that game, I knew this is a home run. They're going to make bank off this game. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I felt the same way for PUBG. I played PUBG in alpha or beta during that time when it wasn't even for sale. And it was unbelievably buggy and laggy. But despite that, I knew, holy shit, this is a home run. And we're seeing the game continue to grow. And he talked about product life cycles, and he shared this chart, if you want to show that real quick, about product life cycle. This is how most people perceive product life cycles to be. And for the most part, this chart is accurate for a lot of console games, Facebook games, and most mobile games. When you launch a game, at the beginning, you have that big revenue spike. Everyone starts playing, and then people start quitting. This is a pretty, normal view of how game launches work. And this has been the case for the longest time. However, if you look at the actuality of product life cycles for good games, it's a totally different story. These are the games that make the most money. These are the most successful games ever. And he lists MapleStory, Dungeon Fighter Online, League of Legends, and Minecraft. And the difference is pretty obvious between these two pictures. You don't have this crazy spike at the beginning and fall off. Instead, you have a pretty steady rise from the get-go. And it keeps increasing, building on itself. And it's pretty clear if you played League of Legends back in the day, you played Hearthstone. For me, maybe not MapleStory and Dungeon Fighter, those weren't so obvious to me. And it's not always obvious, but if you played League, if you played Hearthstone, you knew there was something amazing here, something special. It was to keep bringing in more and more users. And I learned a few things from his presentation. Because for those that don't know, Owen Mahoney, the guy that runs Nexon now, he used to work at EA. Was he the CEO of EA or not? He was in a pretty big position at EA. I forgot what he was.
I forgot too.
Okay, he actually led the buyout of DICE, the people that make Battlefield. And that was actually one of the smartest acquisitions EA has made. Because let's be real, the Battlefield series and Battlefield franchise is so valuable. Yeah. And it's still remarkably successful, right?
I think that's all they have, right? They have Battlefield and sports games. That's EA in my mind.
That is EA, yeah, exactly. And of my favorite EA games is the Battlefield games. And he says, he tried to make a lot of acquisitions at Nexon. And he plans to do more acquisitions. He said he actually tried to buy when he was working at EA. He tried to buy Nexon 4 times. Isn't that pretty crazy? He offered to buy Nexon 3-4 times. They kept saying no, right? Mm-hmm. And eventually, that's why he ended up working at Nexon, because he was always talking to Nexon. And at Nexon, he tried to buy League of Legends. He tried to buy Riot Games in 2010, mm-hmm. before they got bought by Tencent, and they got outbid by Tencent. Oh, and he's like, we would have bid more money if we had it, but this was pre-IPO. They didn't have a lot of money to bid.
I see.
So they actually almost, and if Nexon had bought Riot Games, they'd be so big right now because again, League of Legends is the world's biggest PC game. And he talks about stuff like live updates being the smartest games, the most successful games spend 70% of their development budget on live updates. Whereas, this old mentality of video gaming is you spend all your money making the game and afterwards you spend like nothing, just keeping up to date, make some patches and stuff. But the most successful games spend most of their budget on just updating their game and whatnot.
Yeah, and to me, it's just like it seems like it just comes down to MMOs versus like single player games. I think like a console game traditionally, basically you buy it for $50. It's made to be played for like between like 5 to like 50 hours, right? If it's like a platformer or like a JRPG, you play for like between 5 and 50 hours. And then you put it on the shelf, like kind of like a book, right? Like you buy a book, you read the book, you put the book on the shelf. Whereas the games he lists here, like MapleStory, Dungeon Fighter League, Minecraft, these games don't end. You can keep playing them. The content is really the interaction with players. So I think that's kind of what gives them longevity.
But like that doesn't always apply either, because if you look at the most games on Steam, right? Like Friday the 13th, you guys remember that game? When it launched, it had 16,000 concurrent players. And it's basically now it's 1,600, and that's over a few months, right? This game will be dead in like 4 months. It's gonna join the calling. Friday the 13th. There are multiplayer games that everyone kind of jumps on the bandwagon, and it very quickly turns off, and nobody likes it. It dies down pretty quickly.
Well, you're always gonna have bad. I'm not saying every multiplayer game is a slam dunk, but there are plenty of old multiplayer games that are just doing well. They're still doing well that aren't like MMOs. Like think about like Payday, Left 4 Dead. These games. If you look at Steam charts, these are still games that are doing really well. They sell a lot every month. They're not like #1 performers or anything, but they're they're up there. They're always being played. So I think the key is having multiplayer. I mean, to me it seems obvious, but I guess some people haven't figured it out yet.
And they say that he was talking about what makes gameplay really important, and this was a slide he showed about something called flow. It's a concept that psychologists studied quite in depth, and these are the things that lead to maximum happiness.
Oh, this is interesting.
In most things. So when you talk about flow, he's talking about meaningful work, clear goals, immediate feedback, cooperation, and challenge tuned to ability. And he talked about how each of these apply to gameplay. And I think he talked about like, for example, if you look at this, like if you get this right, it says people always want to play your game like consistently. Yeah. And if you look at, I think, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds off the top of my head, that's like that really, I think, nailed this concept down really well. This concept of flow, where everything in the game has clear goals, cooperation with teammates. And obviously, the last one's pretty obvious. It refers to matchmaking. You want to have a sweet spot in matchmaking, so it doesn't get too imbalanced. Otherwise, you end up in these really weird spots. If you look at this other chart, how flow works between challenge and skill, it's a very delicate line between challenge and skill. Where if you're on the left side of the equation, if you're getting too challenged, you get frustrated. If it's too easy, you get bored, right? So flow's got to be right in that sweet spot in the middle. And this when he talked about games like Hearthstone, League of Legends, like it's so obvious that those games were successful. And I don't think you can call every successful game, but I feel like, and he says if you want to know which games are going to be successful, talk to gamers, because gamers are the most vocal people out there. They want to talk about their opinions. They want to say what they like. And if you talk to anyone that played PUBG, anyone that played like Hearthstone, these games were like clear winners. And I wouldn't say the same about Hearthstone, about Here's the Storm. I played Here's the Storm when it launched. I knew it was just weird and it was odd and it really, it might survive, but it wasn't going to be the slam dunk success that these other games were.
You know what's creepy? This kind of feels like they're designing like the perfect addictive game. Like they're going to turn it into a science.
Yeah. And actually, the funny thing is, at the beginning of his presentation, Owen Mahoney was talking about Moneyball, about this science to gaming, that he wants to apply kind of like the principles of Moneyball of statistics to gaming and what makes a game successful. He said it's very, he said it was a myth that like, it's very hit driven, which like it's almost like manna from heaven, which game succeeds or not. God picks which game succeeds. But that's not the case. You gotta. And if you looked at games like again PUBG, Hearthstone, you can tell if they were successful pretty early on too. It was very clear that League was gonna be successful and keep growing on itself. Maybe like you could have predict how successful it would be, but these things aren't just random.
No, it's not random. But I think he's going too much into it. Because look, I compare it to movies, right? The movie industry is much older than the gaming industry, right? But the movie industry is still driven by hits, and you have very successful directors or whatever, right? Who spend hundreds of millions of dollars, and even they produce flops sometimes. So I don't think it's a given that I don't think there's a formula that will lead to a hit in gaming or movies.
No,
because if there was, I think the movie guys would have found it much sooner than the game guys, because they've been doing it a lot longer.
I guess so, because it would seem obvious if you just tested out with like some like a good, demographic of players to try the game and give your opinion then. I feel like you could just get it down to a science then too.
Well, the good thing about gaming versus movies is, like, especially with MMOs, is you can release it in a beta state. Like, I remember I played MapleStory during like the first year of the beta in America, right? And it had much less content than it has today, right? So they can do a minimum viable product, see what the players like, and then keep adding stuff to that game and cut the other ones. So movies can't do that. You can't make the first 5 minutes of a blockbuster movie and then see if people like it, then make the next 5 minutes. You got to make this huge movie, spend all this time and money, and then hope it does well with audiences.
And I think also with movies too, like you have a start and a finish, right? You have this very clear narrative you're trying to tell. With gaming is supposed to be interactive, and the importance of interaction and immersion experiences. Like when you're playing PUBG, no game is identical. How you respond to things that happen. So you can't present a game like a movie. Where a movie.
No. I think you're conflating the term game and MMO. I know we're MMOs.com here, so we try to talk about MMOs. But games, a lot of console games are exactly like movies, in my opinion. Like you literally, like I'd say the latest Final Fantasy. Yeah, there's some player
RPGs
input.
are like movies.
You go
right?
forward and push X, right? But it's mostly it's not that much different than a movie, in my opinion. A lot of these single player, one and done games are very comparable to movies, in my opinion.
Well, I want to bring last slide. I want to talk. I think Owen Mahoney is clearly incorrect about his. He's talking about flow, and he brings up Lawbreakers as a great example of a game with meaningful goals, meaningful work, clear goals, immediate feedback, cooperation, and challenge to ability. He was very optimistic about this game, and I think for everyone listening, it actually just launched today as of the podcast, and it's
the first piece of news this podcast, guys.
Yeah, and he was trying to use an example of a game he believes is going to be successful. I think he's going to be wrong on this one. I think we've talked about it in the podcast in the past. I don't think Lawbreakers will do well, and I've been saying this since the moment I played the game. The first alpha, I've held this opinion, and I wanted to do well because I do like old school games like Quake, these arena shooters, and I'm going to show you guys some Steam charts right now.
I brought the Steam charts for Lawbreakers. Basically, guys, it came out today. It's $30 on Steam or PlayStation 4. So the numbers you're seeing now are obviously for Steam only. I don't know how to find PlayStation numbers. I'm not a console player, but we got 2,400 players on right now, and the all-time peak, which I think was during beta, so I don't want to count that. But so if you look at the 24-hour peak, which again the game came out today, so that's the peak for today, the launch day. It's a little under 3,000, which I don't know if that's a great performance for the first day launch there.
If this game does phenomenal, I will never. I will admit I was horribly wrong on predicting success, and my interest does not, necessarily coincide with others. But I was so sure about this game doing poorly, and I think it's going to battle. Somebody, Easy Maculay said it was going to Battleborn itself. Or somebody, no, FG3000 is going to Battleborn. I do think it's going to go the exact same route as Battleborn to a degree. I mean, you're competing with a lot of free-to-play games. On the buy-to-play front, you have stuff like Overwatch. Obviously, not the same exact game. You're a free-to-play game from Bethesda, the Quake champions. It's just, I don't know. I played it. Wasn't my cup of tea. Obviously, plenty of people will enjoy the game, and I just don't see it doing well.
Yeah, and I think they will go free to play. So this is like the early access money, retail money grab, before the free to play launch.
100% it's going free to play, I think. But then I thought Battleborn would go free to play, and it took forever for them to finally do it. It took years, I think, for them to go free to play, and they even call it free to play. They call it a free trial.
Well, I mean, the difference, I think, is Nexon is publishing and has a stake in the studio behind Lawbreakers, and Nexon is a free-to-play company. So I think for them to figure out and quickly turn it to free-to-play is much simpler than a studio. I think it was Gearbox that made Battleborn, which is the guys behind Borderlands, and they're obviously known for being a retail studio. Like their history is just making a retail box experience and shipping it. So for them to shift their mindset to free to play is a lot harder than Nexon, which has been doing it for like forever.
True, makes sense. Nexon reports their earnings next week, so we can talk about some of their numbers soon. But we can get to another interesting numbers story, this time from Square Enix. They reported their numbers as well, and they had a pretty big bounce recently to MMO revenue, namely because Stormblood just launched this last quarter rather. Drop the link for you. I think you made an interesting observation over here, which I didn't readily point out right away, is that if you look at the revenue from MMO games, which is it counts obviously Final Fantasy 14, Dragon Quest 10, and Final Fantasy 11, and it's about 9.3 billion yen, which I think I put down in dollar terms, about $84 million. And if you add up all their traditional console game sales, about $100 million, which again counts everything on consoles, Final Fantasy 15, everything that they did that quarter, it's less than all their mobile games.
Yep.
So mobile games is the bright spot for Square Enix. So Square Enix is booming on the mobile game front.
Yep. So to re-say that again, Square Enix makes more money off mobile already than it does off everything else. Right? That's fair.
Yeah, that's because they didn't have a giant launch either. I think they launched Final Fantasy 15 in the quarter. It'd be a different story. But again, those kinds of launches take like 10 years to make because again, Final Fantasy 15 took them forever to make.
Yeah. So this is more like what I was expecting for after the weekly raid. If we look at some of these numbers, guys, it seems like it's so much easier for these studios to churn out mobile games where people don't get so mad over pay to win. There's no Iron Bank, role players guilds here complaining about Chinese gold farmers. They're expected to be, they expect to be beat by the guys who pay more.
And look, I do sympathize with a lot of the people that hate mobile games, okay? Because remember we talked about in a previous weekly raid about what would it take to make you play mobile games. A lot of people said never. I sympathize with a lot of them because so many mobile games are still shit, okay? At least, again, we in the West may be behind the East in adopting them because in Japan, in Korea, in China, mobile games are such a big part of the market. Like half the gaming market is already mobile games and growing in some of those markets. In America, it's a lot less, I think, especially amongst the hardcore players. Like hardcore players in China have already embraced mobile games. In America, they have not. And these games are still so bad, in my opinion, but they're getting better. Again, I challenge you, if you like MMORPGs, right, as almost like a case study for yourself, right? I challenge you to download a game called Crusaders of Light. Okay, the game is okay, right? It's still in this. It has a lot of auto playing elements. Play it on your phone for like 20 minutes, and it'll give you an idea of where mobile games are going. Okay, the quality and production value is going in the right direction. And I think if you look at that game, it's pretty easy to understand that maybe you yourself can embrace mobile games, mobile MMORPGs, especially if you like, if you call yourself a mobile MMORPG gamer, you can see where it's going and you can eventually embrace it. And I do just you don't have to play the game long. I mean, I'm not getting paid to promote the game either. I wish I was, obviously, but I'm not. But it was a good example of a recent MMORPG, persistent world, smooth gameplay, good graphics, and some interesting raid dynamics and dungeon dynamics you can do in multiple different difficulties. They still do a lot of stuff horribly wrong, like all the autoplay nonsense. But you can, and the difficulty curve is awful. It's just stupid easy early on. But if you play it, you'll see that like it's getting better.
Yeah, and what I found really interesting this week, the top financial news of the week for me was the NC Soft earnings. So if you could link those. Yep. And what I found amazing about this is a new game not a new game, but a new mobile game that came out for them is Lineage 1 mobile. And this is not a new spin-off game. This is the original Lineage just ported for mobile, right? Yeah, so so we're at the point where mobile can play like one of the earlier MMORPGs, Lineage 1, fully normally on a phone.
And nobody calls Lineage 1 like this garbage piece of shit mobile game. Lineage 1, it's an old game, but it's consistently remaining one of the highest revenue generating MMORPGs in the world. It's a real MMORPG with a persistent world, and you have this game ported over pretty perfectly on mobile, which is why you see how much Lineage 1's revenue plummeted over the last 2 quarters, basically from 118 million Korean wons, actually 118,000 million Korean wons, down to it went down like 70%, and they all moved over to mobile, as you can see.
All right, so a few points about this graph here. So let's run down. So yeah, like Omar said, the Lineage 1 numbers went down, but that's because those players just wanted a mobile version of the game, so the mobile went up a lot. Now let's look at the other ones. Lineage 2 seems about flat, slightly down. Aeon is down a decent amount, right? From 17,000 from the same time last year to now 10,000. So it's down a big chunk, right? You can look at the bar graphs. But here's what I found funny. Look at the Guild Wars 2, Omar, because you said Guild Wars 2 was an all-time low, right?
Yes.
I feel like this chart is intentionally trying to make Guild Wars 2 look bad. Because look at the numbers. From Q2 2016 to Q2 2017. Look at that decline. From 15,000 to 13,000, right? Why is the bar half the size when it's only a 2,000?
You're right. It is half the size.
But look at Aeon. Look at Aeon. It's from 17 to 10, which is a much bigger percentage. But the bar is like barely down.
You're right. It is. The chart is definitely a bit misleading. This is directly from the NCSoft's own presentation. They are trying to play with the numbers over there.
Why are they doing that? Like they're making their own. It's because they're racist against the Western developed Guild Wars 2.
There you go.
Even though
racist confirmed.
Even though they own Guild Wars 2, they're trying to make it look bad with this chart. Like, I don't mind if like some people complain if like the Y chart, if the graphs, if they don't start at 0, people get mad. I don't mind that. But whatever standard you use, at least keep it consistent between the games. You know, like.
Yeah, because it's down like 25% or so, but 25% should not be half that number.
Yeah, and I mentioned it. I left a comment on this article. I was like, okay, look, so Guild Wars 2 fell 20%, Aeon fell 40%, but if you look at the chart, it shows a way bigger decline for Guild Wars 2 than 20%.
It's worth mentioning too. I feel like a lot of us in the West, especially on RMRPG, we kind of laud like Guild Wars 2 as like this amazing game, and I think it's a good game, right? But people always almost like when people talk about MMORPGs, it's usually they almost always talk about World of Warcraft, Guild Wars 2, Final Fantasy 14, and maybe ESO. Like those are the games that pop into people's head when they go like Western good MMORPGs, right? And because I was on MMO Champion the other day, there's a thread about some of these numbers that came out, and people always bring up Guild Wars 2, but it just seemed like Guild Wars 2 does not really belong in that same conversation. I think it's a good game, but it doesn't have the same cachet or the players as some of these other games. Obviously, that number is going to be quite a bit higher next quarter when they launch the Path of Fire expansion, which was announced last week. So that number was definitely going to increase.
I mean,
it's just that
I disagree with you. I think when people do talk about Western games, Guild Wars 2 is right up there.
Yeah, they do, and
yeah.
I don't think it should be because it doesn't have the numbers.
Really? I think it's a good game. I think
it's a good game as well, but it's just it's clearly not very popular. I mean, otherwise they'd have a lot more numbers, wouldn't they? I think it's a good game. I think it's a great game, but it doesn't belong in the same conversation when you're talking about these mega games. Like World of Warcraft and Guild Wars 2, they seem like so far apart from each other.
I mean, I gotta do the math here. What is I don't know what 13,000 billion.
About $12 million. $12 million.
Okay.
So $12 million for such a giant game and a game that is almost universally liked or respected at least. Not always liked. I think it's pretty respected.
Okay.
$12 million is
quarter,
is
right?
chump change in 3 months.
So
that's like $4 million a month.
So what does like Final Fantasy 14 do in a month?
All we know is that if you forget the expansion numbers that just boost the revenue, if we look at how much money they made in a year, with I think no expansions, it's about $200 million they made.
It's 200 million versus what 48?
Well, and that's Final Fantasy 14, 11, and Dragon Quest 10. I don't think 11 or Dragon Quest 10 makes a lot of money though. I think the majority of that is Final Fantasy.
Okay, I personally, given those numbers, I don't think Guild Wars 2 is an order of magnitude different than Final Fantasy 14. Yeah,
so let's say 150 million to
50.
Yeah, 50 million.
Okay,
3 times.
It's the same ballpark, you know.
But I think it's going in the wrong direction. We'll see how much it jumps from the Path of Fire.
Yeah, Path of Fire expansion coming out.
It's a big expansion, and the beautiful thing again about Path of Fire is that they're going to be launching it so soon after announcing it. You know, it was announced on the first week of August, and it's coming out September, like in a month. And this weekend, you'll be able to try it. You'll be able to see like what the new zones look like. So that's open to like everyone. That's actually pretty badass. That it's going so quickly from announcement to being able to see and play it. That's good shit.
I think as someone who's played these 3 games at the bottom here, Aeon, Blade and Soul, Guild Wars 2, I think Guild Wars 2 has the production value much higher than those other 2. I think I'm biased against Asian 3D games. Like I love the Korean 2D MMORPGs, whether it's Ragnarok, Maple Story. Those are fun. They have character. They have style. But I feel like these 3D Asian games are just so generic. Like, and they're also like.
Blade and Soul is not generic. Blade and Soul is a unique experience. I love Blade and Soul, and I'm glad to see Blade and Soul is like such a big franchise for them, and it's really held steady. But again, if you look down, like where most of that revenue is coming from, it's going to be mostly Asia. I think the next slide shows you where it comes from. Maybe we can get some more detail out of that because I'm curious how much money Blade and Soul makes in America. So we can assume, let's say Guild Wars 2, like all that money comes from America, right, or North America and Europe. So they made 28 million over there. So I think it's evenly split between Guild Wars 2 and Blade and Soul, right? Actually, no, because it should be evenly split, right? Because there's 28 million, 28,000, right, on that number. If you look at the revenue for Guild Wars 2,
it's probably all of that, yeah.
Yeah, so all of Guild Wars 2 money comes from there, and that's about 13,000, right? That means the other half, where could that possibly be coming from? Which one? Lineage 2 is like nobody plays Lineage 2 in the West.
Okay, the other ones are split between Blade and Soul and Aeon.
And Aeon.
Yeah.
And Aeon's pretty,
old
as well. So probably between Guild Wars 2 and Blade and Soul is probably a close split.
And by the way, Guild Wars 2 is still ahead of Aeon in revenues on this chart, so I think it's fine. It's not going to go anywhere for now.
Yeah.
And someone in the chat mentioned BDO. Yeah, BDO is not generic. It's one of the few Korean 3D games I do like. But I was specifically talking about these 6 games here, like this NCSoft lineup.
I think I love the Boob and Soul graphics. It's like so like I don't know why they went with the oily boob art style. I did like the big busty busts in Blade and Soul, but the oily element was kind of weird. I'll give it that. It was definitely weird.
That's what I'm saying. Like I don't know, the graphics in some of these Korean 3D games just look weird to me. Like almost like cheap. Not BDO though. BDO at least looks like realistic-y. High end gameplay.
I had a pretty great screenshot about my Blade and Soul character, where if you put on a different outfit, your character's boobs literally disappear, or get like giant based on what costume you're wearing. It's the only game I've seen where your character's physical appearance, like the size of your character's boobs, goes from like an A cup to like quad D's or whatever's after D's. G's.
E.
It makes E.
E's
G.
After D. After D is E.
Yeah, I know, but we're going down to G. All right, they get pretty enormous when you wear this outfit.
All right, Hell Crush Plays in chat just said, I get embarrassed playing pervy Eastern MMOs. So cringe. Dude, I agree.
Look, I don't. Some of them, very few scenes are like pervy and cringy. I feel like if you're watching anime, you'll probably bump into more cringe scenes than if you play some of these Eastern MMORPGs. I feel like anime always has these weird scenes where like it's very pervy and very baka. But in MMORPGs, even if you're playing Blade and Soul, like you're not always gonna see your boobs flying in the wind like crazy. Nice, Lord Alta anime, not even once.
Yeah, the art style debate is an interesting one. I know I might be changing the subject here, but there's a lot of people like me and who kind of turned off by the whole anime aesthetic. But the opposite is also true. Like I know, here's a big story for the week. Path of Exile, new expansion came out. Tons of new content, free to play, great business model, no pay to win. And it's doing amazing. It's almost 100K on Steam, and this game is not a Steam exclusive. So you got to add more to that. People like me, have been playing for years. We play off Steam with our accounts. So this game is doing really well. Great expansion, great content. But here's the thing. I know so many people. I got to say mostly Asian, to be honest. So many people that are turned off by the visuals, the graphic style. So it's like the opposite. Like some Western people don't like the anime aesthetic, and some Asians I feel don't like that gritty Western aesthetic, Diablo 2 style aesthetic. So what do you think?
I don't like that either, personally, because I do know, again, people that won't play a game because of this anime aesthetic, this Asian aesthetic. And it seems kind of shallow to kind of write off a game because of that. I understand the art style does matter, and it's not going to appeal to everyone, but you shouldn't write off, I think, a great game like Path of Exile because the art style isn't like cutesy anime,
Yeah, the thing is, I actually think the aesthetic is really nice in Path of Exile. It's different, right? But it's like if you look at this, these visuals, and if you zoom in, and if you have a good computer to like play it at max settings, and you zoom in, it's a good-looking game in my opinion. The aesthetics are different, but it looks good.
My most frustrating thing is I know someone who says, "Oh, I don't like Avatar: The Last Airbender or Legend of Korra because it's not anime." I'm like, "Are you serious? Like, who gives a shit? Like, if it was, like." Who animated it? It's still got that same like look to it. Like just because it wasn't made, I guess, by a Japanese person, it just seems such a silly reason to write something off. Like this attitude of dismissing a game.
You know what I find funny? Well, the thing is, people like that they have a minimum boob requirement. So if there's any female characters with less than a D cup, that cartoon is off limits for them.
Are you talking about me?
It's a broad cross section of the anime audience.
No, I mean I like to think I'll play a game even if it's got the only thing that kind of bothers me sometimes is those cringe moments. And I think Blade and Soul had a couple cutscenes where it was like, look, I think it's fun to let you make your boob as crazy big as you want, right? But like the NPCs have giant boobs as well, and like in the cutscenes it looks so weird sometimes. Like and those can definitely be cringe moments. I mean, if you want to make your character like just hilariously busty and fun and perverted and like overly sexual, that's cool. I don't mind games letting you do that. It's maybe the NPCs shouldn't be entirely that direction.
And yeah, someone in chat mentioned a great point. WildStar is another one of those games that I feel like so many people, when they first saw it, they're like, the art's not doing it for me. I thought it was a fluid game, like there were reasons I didn't like it, but the art style was not not one of them.
I think art style was really good in that game. Actually, I liked it a lot.
I was like neutral towards it. Like I didn't know until someone said something. Someone mentioned it. I think it was Shu. Who was like, "Oh, this art is weird. I don't like it." I didn't even think about the art like one way or the other. So but it is interesting.
So again, if you look at the numbers, Path of Exile up to like close to 100,000 concurrent users. And if you look at the days prior to the launch of the expansion, it was averaging a little over 10,000. So I don't think I've seen an expansion boost the game's player base, active player base, by like about tenfold. A tenfold jump in active players on Steam alone. A lot of people are still playing on off Steam, but we don't have those numbers obviously. But have you ever seen an update increase the player base tenfold? That seems insane. It's arguably the biggest, probably arguably the most successful expansion in terms of boosting players and adding content, because you had the 6 new acts. The Easy Immaculate pointed out to me they weren't entirely new. They used like towns and pieces of other acts to make it.
Yeah. I heard the 10th act is new, and like the 5th one is new or something. But then like a lot of the ones in between are just like reused content. Which by the way I don't know yet because I haven't played. I was gone last week, so after the podcast, we're gonna do some shopping, and then I'm gonna play some Path of Exile, make a new character on the new league, and you guys, I'm gonna stream it so you guys can watch me play the new expansion if you are so inclined.
Yeah, 10 times is unbelievably impressive. I think Path of Exile is also one of those games that I felt from the get-go was going to be a big success. Like it was going to be a consistent game. Now, too many games are popular for like 2-3 months, and they're like meme games. They're like Twitch meme games or Twitch fad games. But I could tell from the get-go that it was not one of those games. And I think we were talking previously, like, if you were an Exile, what company would you buy? And I think you said Grinding Gear Games, because Path of Exile has proven itself to be this, this game with a big lifespan and longevity and interesting. I think it's free to play done right as well. It's one of the few games I think that really doesn't really offend anybody with the free to play features.
Definitely. And if it's one of those games, like if all these companies are looking to buy more studios, whether it's Tencent, NetEase, Nexon, Netmarble, they're all looking to acquire new companies. And if any of them called me and one of my advice, I'd say, listen, pay whatever it takes and buy Grinding Gear Games. One, they make a great game, and two, they know how to make their game free to play, and the monetization reach Western gamers. Because the thing is, so many companies like NetEase has said this before. Their games do well in China, but they can't do well here because I think they're not used to making their games appeal to Western audiences from like a monetization point. It's like it's too obviously pay to win.
And just to give you guys some context, I'm sure not a lot of people know what NetEase makes. They make that Crusaders of Light game, the mobile game I did a video for. They also make what was that game where we killed all those like food, the dumplings? Revelation Online. They make Revelation Online. So these are games that they didn't. My.com published Revelation, but it is developed by NetEase, and they're the second biggest gaming company in China. I think they're worth as much as Activision Blizzard. They're like a $40+ billion company, but their games, again, they don't appeal to Westerners just yet.
And it's a funny story. So we have pretty strong opinions on Revelation Online, whether it's a good game or not. But putting those aside, right? Whether you think Revelation's a good game or not, if you played it like we have, wasn't it just confusing? Like when I opened a cash shop, I just don't know what to do. Like let's say I want to give them $100. There's just so much weird stuff going on. Like there's all these upgrade items, and I just could not figure out how to give them my money and what to do with what I got with the money. So whereas in Path of Exile, I know exactly what I can get with the money. I can get cosmetics, and I can get more inventory space in my stash. So it was very simple to me what I was getting for my money. And even like in Albion, right? Like I know I pay money, I get gold. With gold, I can buy game time or transfer it to silver and buy stuff in game. So I knew where my money was going. But in Revelation, I just could not figure the mechanics out. It was just confusing.
Revelation is one of those games that made me feel dumb. But I realized it's not me anymore, because it wasn't just the cash shop. It was the way the game was structured, right? You're literally, for the first, I think, 2 hours, you're on this rail where you basically click like next quest, your character runs, and you kill like 2 enemies, you go to the next quest. And for an hour, you're just completing these quests like boom, 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 boom. A quest every 30 seconds, right? And these weird cutscenes, you're always skipping in between them. And by the time you're done, like now you got to kind of figure out where you want to go, do your dailies, and the game opens up after like 2 hours of doing these like rail missions, right? And then you open up your inventory and you freeze up. You look at your inventory, there's a ton of shit in your inventory. Like I have these eggs of something, I have these like there's like 100 different items in inventory, and I have no idea what they do. None. Zero. Zilch. There's so much shit in your inventory, and they're confusing. You don't know what to do. Should I keep this? Should I throw it away? I'm running out of inventory space. What do I do? Like, you don't know what to throw away. You have tokens for one NPC, tokens for a different NPC. It was unbelievably complicated. I'm sure if you just really sat down and tried to figure it out, you could, but it got to a point where like I didn't want to figure it out. It was too daunting. You know, it was just too much.
Yeah. So, long story short, I think Path of Exile is not a simple game either, right? It's, you know, there's randomly generated, you know, modifiers for all the equipment that drops. There's over 100 different skills based on these gems and interactions. But I think they can help many other studios figure out how to present their games in a way that's still complicated and still can be monetized, but is more approachable by Western audiences.
Chinese MMORPGs have a tendency to have like a million different ways to make your character stronger. Like you have like a weapon upgrading system, you have like this rune upgrading system, you have like these 7 different kinds of skill trees. It's never so clear cut. And I guess that works in China, right? It's fine, but it does not, because maybe they grew up playing a lot of those games and they all had that system, right? But I think a lot of Western MMORPG players, they grew up playing Western MMORPGs and Korean ones, right? And there's a world of difference between Korean MMORPGs and Chinese MMORPGs. Chinese MMORPGs throw like a million systems at you, like so many different ways to make your character stronger, and it's just confusing. If you're not willing to put in the time, you get frustrated very quickly. And I got frustrated almost with every Chinese MMORPG I've played, whether it's Browser or Revelation Online. And I really think I gave Revelation an earnest attempt to like play it, because you know they ran we did 2 Grindfest videos for it, I think, and they advertised with us. So I wanted to see what the game was about. You know, I genuinely wanted to give it a fair shake. But it was not my cup of tea.
No. Back to Steam charts here. So obviously it went down slightly since the peak when it launched, but Path of Exile is still number 4 on Steam overall. So number 1 is Dota, number 2 is Counter-Strike, and that's been the 1 and 2 for a long time now. 3 is PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and number 4 sitting pretty at Path of Exile. I'm very happy to see it there. And like I said before, this is not the total player base. There are lots of players, returning players, new players that probably just go right through their own website, their own launcher. So it's good stuff. Good stuff. I'm happy it's doing well.
Easy Molecular made a good point too, that he played D3 and it was just too simple and it got really boring. And actually, the way you described Diablo 3 to me, because I didn't play Diablo 3, I played Diablo 2 and 1, of course. He said it was too simple and it became really boring. So I think the opposite is true as well, where you get too frustrated on the bullshit complexity. It's not even complex. They just throw a million things at you. Where if it's too simple, it gets very boring very quickly too.
Well, because this is a great time to bring back that chart that
the flow chart,
the Mr. Mahoney at Nexon point out. See the flow. All right, you can't make it too boring like Path of Exile. I mean, excuse me, like Diablo 3, and you can't make it too frustrating like Revelation Online with all these different tokens and currencies. You know, you got to get that flow just right.
Now, I'll drop the link to this this video. This presentation was, you know, more aimed at investors and fund managers looking at investing in game companies. But I thought, you know, he talked a lot about the industry, and I thought it was pretty fascinating. So if you like the industry side of this, maybe some of the flow charts we showed. It's an hour long. I usually listen to these presentations at 2 times speed because you get the whole message even at 2 times speed. But I thought it was pretty cool.
The only thing I think is kind of frustrating about Path of Exile is it's kind of like Diablo 2 in that there is no easy skill reset. Resetting a single skill is a very expensive currency it takes in game. So it's very easy in Path of Exile to mess. In fact, everyone was going to mess up their first character in Path of Exile. So that means if you actually want to play it optimally, you got to make a new character and just redo a lot of the content that you already did. And then you're just going to be like, damn, I wasted 10 hours on that useless ass character I made because I put the points everywhere. So,
you screwed it up.
Yeah, and that reminds me of Diablo 2, right? Where you just could not reset your skills.
There's no way to reset skills in Diablo 2 at all.
Diablo 3 took the easy approach. There is no like allocation of skills. You just unlock skills as you level for each class, and you can just switch them in and out at any time.
But that's not good. That seems so like bad because every, you know, paladin is the same as every other paladin. Every character, you know, is going to be the same. And I really hate that about MMORPGs too, because like we've seen like a lot of old school Korean MMORPGs, they give you a lot of like skill builds and like skill trees, right? But I feel like we've lost skill trees to a degree. You know, WoW kind of made it popular with talent trees. But if you play Final Fantasy 14, every single black mage, every single paladin, every single everything is identical. There is literally not one iota of difference to the skills they have. In fact, there used to be a stat system in the game. They got rid of it because there's only ever one proper way to do stats, right? So they just got rid of it. And that was smart to get rid of it because it was so poorly designed anyway that they got rid of it. But it's frustrating that my black mage has the same exact capabilities as any other black, same skills, same everything. Like, I should be able to at least specialize in maybe one way to make myself different, even if it's like very nuanced differences. Maybe like 1% more damage, 1% more mana regen, slightly different cooldown reduction. And when you have this kind of control over your characters, I think it makes you more invested in your character. It just feels cheap, I think, to be the same as everyone else. And the game actually had this pretty cool system too. When you know, for example, if you had a level 15 archer, you had a skill called something strikes. I forgot what it's called. I don't know why it escaped me right now. It's a cross skill. So you could actually have that skill in other characters. So as a black mage, it was imperative for me to have a level 15 archer. It's all in one character anyway. I can switch to an archer, level to 15. I get the Raging Strikes, it was called. And when I unlock that ability, I don't have to play archer anymore because I got that skill on him. And that's the only useful archer skill that's a cross skill that I need. So when I'm back on my black mage, I can actually use that archer skill. Huh. So it kind of gave me an incentive to level up other classes because it would actually help my character, right? Mm-hmm. In that game, again, you can literally max everything out. I thought that was really cool. But they got rid of that as well because I guess maybe they figured that it was too much to ask for to expect players to level everything up, you know? So that one form of customization, that one bit of like way to differentiate your character is gone in the game now, which I think is unfortunate. Now there's literally no way to make your character different in any which way, shape, or form.
Nice.
Pistol points out that Rift still has in-depth class building. I like that. I think, you know, I think a lot of modern games kind of gave up with that. And again, you mentioned Diablo 3 kind of just doesn't have that either, which is unfortunate. We still have games that have it, but I feel like games are moving away from that, unfortunately. Yeah. And some of the Western games are going too simple.
I mean, I remember Rift at launch was actually, I think they actually made it slightly easier since free to play. But Rift at launch had the most complicated, it had a triple classing system. So, you know, some games had double class. This game had triple class. But the new system is pretty, and by new, it's old as hell now. But Rift is still a solid game.
Rift is an oddball. I think they had like they're very unsure about their business model. It's free to play, but then they launched a paid expansion. That's always weird for me when you have a free to play game, and it's like first Rift started as subscription based. You had to buy it and subscribe. Then it went fully free to play, and like the next few expansions were all free to play. And then they launched a buy to play expansion. It's just confusing. I don't like when games do that. Stick with one model.
Indeed. All right.
That's actually, I mean, let me bring up another fun bit of news. This is actually the most perplexing things to me because this last week, Darkeden, which is a self-proclaimed best horror MMORPG of 2017, relaunched this week again. And I say odd. I say odd because it's literally the 4th or 5th time this game has relaunched. It's the same game. It's been, first of all, the original game came out in 1997.
Wow.
So I'm not sure why they say they're the best horror MMORPG. I don't think there are any other horror MMORPGs in that running.
Hold up.
But you know, they're the self-proclaimed best horror MMORPG.
Whenever you say horror, I just hear horror. So I was like, wait, the best horror MMORPG?
Horror. Okay, there you go.
All right.
But it's like this because you mentioned Diablo, and it kind of reminded me of this as well. It's kind of like this Diablo 1 art style. And this game was kind of cool, right? When I remember playing this ages ago. But it's just so weird to relaunch this game again.
Wait, isn't this game already on Steam?
Oh yeah, it is. But no, this is Darkeden Origin. The one that's on Steam is called Darkeden Cataclysm.
The same game though, right?
Yeah, of course. But if you go on the Steam charts right now and you search Darkeden, actually, you get both versions of the game. Because this Darkeden Origin is coming out on Steam on the 17th on August. It's already out on GameandGame.com. I gave you the link for it. But they're going to be competing with each other on Steam. And they are literally the same exact game.
Well, we'll see which of them has more players. I mean, I don't think Darkeden will be hard to beat with 12. So
yeah, it's at 12. And I was looking at the differences. I think they said the graphics were slightly improved. Maybe my eyes are bad. I couldn't see the slightly improved graphics in that video. It looked the same as Darkeden always did. And a slightly revamped story. But come on, nobody's playing this game for the story. Literally nobody.
So, Omar, are you going to play the Slayer, the Vampire, or the Ouster?
So he actually made a good point. There was actually that Requiem MMO. So there is actually the second horror MMORPG. You're right, Crunky Fish. My bad. I forgot about Requiem. Bloody Mare. Or Memento Mori, whatever it was called. Those are the expansions. But Requiem from War Portal was the only other horror MMORPG out there. So I guess Darkeden is not the only one. My bad. There's one other game. Though it's really just a fantasy game with like some darker tones to it.
I'm not optimistic. This game. It is celebrating its 20th anniversary if it came out in 1997.
Right? But yeah, this game's been out for 20 years. pretty impressive. You know, this old game. I don't think it ever did very well in America.
Mm-hmm.
I think it did well in its home market in Korea. I think in Korea they have Darkeden too, but that never went anywhere, or at least never came out in America.
I am glad that this is on Steam. I think a lot of these old MMORPGs, they're a lot more accessible just for people who want to like see, from a historic perspective. It's much easier to access on Steam than trying to fiddle with old YouTube videos or private servers or whatnot. So I'm glad it's being preserved by somebody.
And this game was like kind of cool because you had like slayers, like guns and stuff too. So like, you had like almost these modern elements, like I think it was slayers, hunters, and vampires, and it was a really interesting war between like the vampires. They were in on the vampire craze before like Twilight, all right? They got in on this pretty early, and there are some really cool design elements here. And I think back then, I hate to always harken to the olden days, but like a lot of these old games had some pretty unique design, and I feel like so many games today really fit the mold of just being WoW clones. Or like, there's really only so many archetype of games out there anymore. You have like the WoW clone, and you have the knockoff of Dungeon Fighter Online, where you have instanced dungeons and persistent towns. Like those two genres alone encompass like 80% of MMORPGs. And you have ARPGs, right? This top-down isometric look, right? Those like 3 types of games, I feel like describe so many games. And even amongst all the WoW clones, there are rarely like things in the game that make it much different than other games. Like it's unfortunate. There's so much in this game. There's so much innovative design involved. If you play the game or you played it back in the day, you'll recognize it. But I don't recommend this game to anyone today because it's old and really hard to get into.
You know what it looks like to me? It looks like Diablo 1, but you're with a higher resolution. Like you zoomed out more, like with the mouse wheel, like you zoomed out, so your camera is further away. But it's like Diablo 1.
And worth mentioning, somebody mentioned that's why BDO is lit, and I do agree. BDO at least it does a lot different. And again, which is why we kept being surprised that it was a Korean developed MMORPG. You know, we always have, I guess, this. I mean, we do kind of view Korean games often as like these uninspiring games, but BDO was definitely did something different, and they really high production value with that as well. So they did a phenomenal job, and BDO is still killing it on Steam as well.
Let's see how it's doing. Black Desert Online.
And this shows that there is I think that people are still very fascinated with MMORPGs and they want an MMORPG to play, which is why Black Desert is doing so well on Steam, which is why Albion Online's launch had so many people. Again, we have no official numbers because it's not on Steam, but easily over 30,000 players were playing Albion. And people are interested. They want to play an MMORPG. You know, there's always hype for that next MMORPG, and it's there because everyone wants to, the genre has so much potential, infinite potential, which is why, again, all these Kickstarter games that promise innovative elements like Star Citizen, Chronicles of Valyria, Astral Creation, they raise all this money on hope because everybody wants this great new MMORPG.
Well, if those of you who want a new MMORPG and are just console plebs, there is some hope for you. Blade and Soul is coming to consoles. And this is following. Really good. Yeah. This is following a huge list of games coming to console, or that already came to console. Whether it's Elder Scrolls Online, Neverwinter, Skyforge,
DC Universe Online,
Black Desert, and even my game of choice later today, Path of Exile is coming to Xbox One, Terra, etc. So we got a lot of games coming on console, and Blade and Soul will join them. How do you think it'll do?
I think both Terra and BDO lend themselves better for consoles. And Blade and Soul is an action MMORPG, so it'll still be decent on consoles. I'm trying to think because there's a lot of buttons you need, like especially when you're doing PvP. For PvE, you're fine, right? But there is really, you do have to regularly use a lot of skills, and that's what I kind of liked about Blade and Soul. It's one of the few games where you really felt like you had a lot of skills to use. And if you got to be efficient in DPS or efficient in PvP, you don't just mash 2 buttons. You can't win by mashing 2 buttons. You actually use all your abilities, and you had so many abilities. So that's why it kind of makes you question if it can be practical on a controller. I'm sure they'll design around it, and it's certainly possible because it's going to happen. They talked about in their earnings call that they're going to make this game on console. But I think it'll be a little harder than maybe Terra or BDO. But yeah, BDO has a lot of buttons too. So seeing how BDO works on a console, like on a controller, will be interesting. I think because it's an action MMORPG, it'll still do very well though. And I think Blade Soul is a great game. I really enjoyed it, and I actually just re-downloaded it, so I'll probably give it another whirl. The storytelling isn't awful either. It's got the production value for like the cutscenes, the stories, so it's not terrible either. Obviously, you don't play an MMORPG for its story, except maybe some parts of Final Fantasy XIV I think are phenomenal. or Star Wars: The Old Republic. I think these will do well though.
Well, all right. Well, I hope so. And quickly, I just realized. So, people were complaining about the optimization in Path of Exile, and that's an old game now. Path of Exile is when did I played it on I played it on like a first gen i7. Okay, and I didn't because our first computers here when we moved to Vegas in 2010 were first gen i7s, and it was fine. Never chugged. So. Some of you guys out there are really, really playing on some old ass PCs. Let me tell you, when I complain about optimization, which I do sometimes, like when PUBG launched, it was giving me optimization issues on a modern i7, like 1 year ago.
You have a top line PC.
Yeah, top of line 1080 GTX, and I was still chugging, right? So that is bad optimization. Path of Exile, if Path of Exile is chugging for you, I think the problem lies, on your end. Sorry to say.
I agree. I do feel like you need to have a decent PC. And I feel like considering how much, most of us play PC gaming, I mean, it's not unusual to spend money on keeping your PC up to date. I mean, considering how many hours of entertainment you get out of it. I think any amount of money I spend on my PC, or even if I have a new keyboard or mouse or whatever, it's compared to the value I get for going to the movies or eating out, like nothing beats, PC gaming for me because I get countless hours of fun and enjoyment.
I think that's a good rant for post-game, guys.
Right.
So many people, I feel, are so cheap when it comes to their PCs, even though like they're on their PCs all day. Like, I've updated my PC once in the past 7 years. I've changed computers once in 7 years, and I changed my phone like way more every 2 years. I change my phone, and this phone, guys, by the way, these phones aren't cheap. I think the cheapest I can get like an iPhone now is like $1,000, right?
600, 700, I think.
Well, if you get the smallest, I think it's more than 700, especially with tax. But anyway, we'll save that for the post game. You can hear me bitch about people who are too cheap.
Bitch about people being too cheap on for their PCs. That's especially when they spend money on other shit. Yeah. If you're broke, I get it. Obviously, save your money. But if you're blowing money on like nonsense, money better spent on PC.
Indeed. So if you want to hear more of that nonsense, stay tuned. If you miss it on YouTube, catch us live so you can hear it in person next time. All right, take it easy, guys.
Later for YouTube.